everyone. Here I am on Nichols Drive, just north of the railroad tracks. There's a good 9 inches of water in the street. I want to show you, this is the most water I've seen anywhere in the city. It's really piled up. I didn't see it in the low ground near Lemieux. I didn't see it in the southeast in the low ground, but here it's pretty deep. I came out and measured it at 9 inches. The tropical storm Cristobal. So I don't know if there's a drainage issue here or if it's just a little lower with a dip, but it's the deepest water I've found. In the Mississippi coast, we're in one of the most dangerous places in the world for flooding, especially coastal flooding from hurricanes. And so really interesting that we're out here collecting information on these building elevations and the flood history, things like that. But here we are in one of the most dangerous areas in the world to flooding.
Nobody would touch my house because my house moved. It actually moved and was hanging off on that side right there about, I'd say about 2 or 3 foot. It was hanging off that side and the back end had dropped down. And so nobody would mess with it. There was a guy going around from Kosciuszko, Mississippi, and he was, taking houses and putting them back on foundations. And I lucked up. When my house moved, first of all, nobody would touch it. You could go inside, you could see the ground. I mean, just everything. The house was warped when it set back down. It set back down on floor joists. And the guy told me, he said, if you don't move this house, it's gonna dry and you're gonna have everything buckled.
Sure.
So I ended up getting him to move it. And the honest reason I did that, didn't want to tear it down, because the house was built in the 40s. And back in those days, they used what they call storm sheeting. So I had a choice, put it back or tear it down and wait to see what they were going to do.
Oh, so there was some uncertainty, like how high are you going to be required to build? Nobody knew.
That's right. And you could see the people over there, how high they went, and I didn't have a choice.
One of the most interesting features in our area of Biloxi is actually this railroad track that runs right through our study area. It's interesting because it's a lot higher elevation than surrounding areas. So I just measured here with the GPS. The elevation of the railroad track right here is around 15.8 feet, but just down the hill here behind me, it drops off really tremendously, and we get down lower than about 8 or 9 feet. So a big drastic change, and local hurricane history shows that water pushes around this area, and sometimes this railroad track can actually serve as somewhat of a dam to block up the water. I'm out here on Biloxi Bay with my GPS, actually measuring the elevation of the water. Now that might sound strange. You might say, well, of course, the water is at sea level. It's actually not. So we measure elevations in something called a datum. It's just an arbitrary, constant vertical line. And the reason we do that is because sea levels are always changing, even in the course of a day, right? We have high tide, low tide, mean sea level, but then over time, we have sea levels rising. And so this becomes really interesting in looking at flood risk analysis, because people will get an elevation certificate or they'll get their house surveyed and they'll say, oh, this is great. I'm at 10.35 feet. Well, I just came out here today and I measured the water level. The water level is actually at 1.35 feet today above the arbitrary datum. So people think they're 10.35, they're really 9.0. So typically around the Gulf, sea level is higher than the datum, sometimes by 1 or 2 feet, or even slightly more depending where you are. And this can really play into really making us more risky, because people think they're higher than they really are. This would not have been an area that I would have picked out as the most inundated, but it shows value in the project, getting out during a storm and seeing what you see on the ground. What an exciting project. We accomplished several things with this work. The first thing, we built the first comprehensive coastal flood history for the city of Biloxi. We took these data and we actually used them to run statistics of the frequency of extreme water levels. We also looked at future flood events, looking at sea level rise scenarios provided by the Northern Gulf of Mexico Sentinel Site Cooperative. We looked at the sea level rise scenarios for intermediate low, intermediate, and intermediate high going out to the year 2060. And so a second part of this project was building out an inventory of building elevations. We did that for over 1,200 buildings in Biloxi using elevation certificates, GPS fieldwork, and street level imagery we created building elevation maps for over 1,200 buildings, and then we superimposed that on the flood level. We also compared building elevations to FEMA's base flood elevation. That's the recommended building elevation to get above the 100-year floodplain according to FEMA's models, and we found 73% of buildings in our project area were actually elevated below FEMA's base flood elevation, and they were in the flood zones. So the city of Biloxi can see where these houses are that will get flooded now and in the future. We think that will help with planning, we think that'll help with zoning, and we think certainly that will help with emergency management and response to active storm scenarios in the future.